Alright, so we're going to try out this camera angle here, but what I wanted to show is the next step I've got to do for one of my customers. And if I can find the example piece, I need to make 50 of these. Okay, it's a custom adapter he wanted. So what we're doing is we're making them out of 303 stainless, and I just started cutting them down to, you know, project size pieces. But what I wanted to do is cut them quickly and somewhat accurately, and by that I mean they need to be about 14 millimeters. We're going to do all the facing operations and everything in subsequent phases, so I just want to be able to chunk these off quickly. So what I did in order to do that is put in this stop really quickly. I just took a couple of hold downs from my mill, clamped them in place, measuring 14 centimeters. I'm sorry, 14 millimeters, 14 centimeters. All right, so then what I can do is I can touch off here, and I know that I'm 14 centimeters for the remaining piece. So right here. So you can see that's going to cut right off where I want it. So then just crank off of there, start the lathe up, sorry, and then I just keep parting off. So part off, cut one, loosen the collet, you know, slide the stock in place, clamp the collet, come back, touch, cut, just lather, rinse, repeat here. Boom, just like this. And just advancing the stock each time, and I was able to cut all these little pieces out in just a matter of minutes. It didn't really take that long at all. Okay, so that was just the history on getting to here. What I need to do now is I'll need to be able to create those features that I was just showing you, and all of these dimensions are very critical dimensions. The length from here to the end is a critical dimension. This barrel is a critical dimension in circumference as well as length. This thread, of course, and this surface in here is actually a seating surface, so this has to be machined very accurately. And the same thing for this end. You probably can't see it, but there is a small stair step on the end of here that is very important to the function of this, and the end has to be very smooth, as you can see. Okay, so in order to create this in volume with efficiency, I think the best way to go about that is going to be able to use my collets, but I want to put a collet stop in here. So when I insert these pieces, they go into the same position every time. So then I'll be able to cut them all to length very quickly, because I won't have to constantly remeasure everything. And then I'll have a reference point for my apron when I slide back and forth. Now, as you can see on here, these still have the little bump from when the parting blade cut them off. So I don't have a stop for inside my collet. I'll need to machine that, and that's what I wanted to make today's video about. So as I go through, I started thinking about this more and more last night, and most of the stops that I've seen are essentially a nut in the back of a collet. Well, a threaded portion, as you can see, goes in here. And there'll be a nut to crank it in with, and then a set screw that holds a piece of stock similar like this that slides in and out. You'll see what I mean when we get going a little further. But this is a very small dimension, and because of these little burrs that may exist, I want to be able to have a small hole. Basically just take a pilot bit and put a hole in the end of this, so that when these seat, they're seated on the surface here, not on that little burr that may be a variable distance and causing me to throw my measurements off. Because of that, I decided I'm going to make the shaft of the collet stop considerably larger. So instead of a small diameter shaft, something maybe a ½ inch, I'm going to have to see what fits and what works. I got to measure all this up. But what that'll allow me to do is then whatever I need to do with the stop shaft that is in there, I could always machine a feature into the shaft. So a lot like an emergency collet, you can kind of consider this an emergency shaft. So hypothetically, I could, in the end of the shaft, have a small hole that allowed this to recess into it and seat on this surface, allowing me to have a very accurate and highly repeatable surface every time I put in a very small piece, because you can see there's very little clamping area on here. So when I cut this end, all right, this will be very easy to cut, because this will yet to be machined and will be in the collet, and I'll have considerable amount of stock to reduce and thread this end. When I turn it around the other way, however, to do this end, That's not really true. And all I really have to hold on then is this small diameter. So if that were further into the collet, inside of the stop, this surface resting against the front of the stop, positioned with my collet, I should get a much more stable hold and a repeatable position. I hope that all makes sense, and I hope the subsequent video really helps clarify it. Okay, well, I was looking for some stock to make my collet stop with, and unfortunately the only thing I have in inventory right now is 1-inch bar. This is larger than an inch. The interior specification for the threads is a 1.041 by 24. So had to find something large enough. Going through scrap, I found this little sleeve that I'll be able to use. It is slightly larger than the hole, so I'll be able to machine it down to the necessary size. I would like it to be a little bit larger in diameter, just so I had a little bit more of a register here when I tighten it in, and have a little bit thicker wall when I put the flats on for tightening it. But I think that'll work fine. It's got enough thickness that when I put a set screw in here, it'll still be able to grab onto the shaft of the collet stop. So I'll get this all chucked up and we'll start the process. All right, here we are. Let's get start with a little cleanup activity. All right, here we go. We got our boring bar in. Let's just touch off and get to work. There. Ooh, yeah. There we go. Much nicer. Let's see what our diameter is. And again, this isn't anything that needs to be highly precise, so I'm just using my cheater here. .779. All right. That's pretty good. We'll bring it back just a little bit. There we go. Well, that's a nice smooth finish in there. .783. Maybe we're just going to go for a 0.8. Make it easier for making pieces in the future. Internal. 7.8. 7.8. Yep. Technically, I want to shoot for a little bit over 8. 0.8, just so when I do a 0.8 stock, yeah, we're 79.50, perfect. It'll have a slip fit in there. There we go. This should do it. And I know I said the finish didn't matter. It's just for me. It's an internal part. Yada yada yada, and I just couldn't take it. Still got some scratch lines from the previous cuts. I'll go a couple thou more. There we go. That's nicer. Get some emery on that. That should be good. So that little top hat that was left was just a little bit bigger than I wanted, more than one just peel off with fingers. So I just popped it in here real quick. And we'll just surface this end off. There we go. So in checking some of my other collets, I noticed they're not all threaded as deep internally, and there's a little gap. So I'm going to end up having to turn this down and just take off 1/8 of an inch or so. But what I decided is, since I'm at the lathe, and I got the lathe work going, why not turn down the insert that'll go inside of here. So really all this is for is just to size up and see where we're going. So I can have one that'll at least go all the way to the front of a collet and have a little bit sticking out. There we go. So we'll just mark this real quick. If I can get my marker open. I mean, this isn't a critical length at all, but this will give us enough that we can have that fully faced if we need to have something very, very, very small with a backstop. So here we go. Actually, I'm going to bring that in and face it off first. So it does have kind of a rough finish on it. It's got the saw cut, not a great saw cut at that. Find our mark. Now I want to shoot for 0.81, turning this down and then finalize it as we go along. So I'm just going to do a rough cut down here just to get a dimension we can measure from. Plus this stick out is really long, so I have to do tiny cuts even though it's aluminum. And you turn something and get that shine. I love that. Alright. We are 0.869. Alright, so 86. We'll call it. We got 60 thou to take off. Boy, I said I was going to come back in a little bit after we turn this down. But if you remember, I said I was going to make this, turn down to 8.2. I mean, come on. Really. Hitting your number first time. That always feels good. Okay, now we're going to go bring it back down to the 8.1 just to test fit. Well, here we are. A little under 8.1 is what I wanted. A little over 8, right? So 80845. Here's our piece. Nice slip fit, but not too much wiggle. So I can do a 0.8. That'd probably be fine. I mean, it's only 8 thou difference on there. But this is exactly what I wanted. So when I put the set screw in, I'll be able to clamp this anywhere I want, have a nice backing surface. Perfect. So just go chamfer this corner and cut it off, and this one's done. I don't know about you guys, but I always love parting off. So figured I'd record it for you. Okay, so this is the piece we just parted off. And if you recall, I mentioned about these little burrs that might remain on a part prior to finishing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to face this off just to make sure it's flush. Of course, chamfer the corner, but then we're going to center drill right here just to give a tiny little relief for any of those. There we go. And now you'll see we have a flat end if for some reason this ever becomes a problem. But now when these pieces are in here, that little burr has a spot to go. Otherwise, I don't know if you can see that on camera, there's a considerable amount of rocking from something that is probably just a few thou high. But here, we get to sit dead flush. There we go. Alright, so here we are at the mill, getting ready to mill the flats. And what I ran into is kind of funny, actually. The adapter that I just made, the actual collet piece that's threaded that goes inside of the end of the collet, is so short that by the time I stuck it out from here to have a flat surface to mill on, that it wouldn't register square. So I sat there looking at a bunch of my different collets, finding if I had anything tight or smaller or whatever, and I realized I've got the collet in the collet block. The collet is tight. I'll just screw it into the other end. So here we go. So I got it screwed into the other end. We're going to put a couple flats on the end of here, and we'll be good to go. And now what I'm going to do, while we're here, flip it. Remember, we got to drill our hole for the set screw. So I am going to put a small flat for the set screw, just so the drilling operation is a little bit easier. And we'll approximately center that. and that's just so when we drill the set screw location, we have a flat spot to start our drill operation. Okay, let me get set up for drilling and tapping, and we'll come back. Okay, here we go. Got my stock inserted just so I know my grub screw is bottomed out on the stock. Bring our table up a little bit. And we're going to basically just take that screw off, leave it a little bit proud, so there'll still be enough that we can bevel and taper that. But that ought to do it. Whoops! Didn't think about that. The screw wants to turn out. It's the opposite direction. Okay, hold on here. That's kind of funny. Get a little more tension here. We're cutting these threads off anyway, so who cares? There we go. Let's try that out. Nope, same thing. Alright, we're gonna have to go. I've got a M5.8 collet for the mill, and for the lathe, so we'll go pop that in the lathe and cut that down. But now we can clearly see where we want to cut it too, so all good. We'll switch over to there. So here I've got this emergency collet that I drilled and tapped to M5 by 0.8 for a similar project. We're just going to insert that in the lathe here. We'll crank down on this guy and get it cut to length. There we go. Got our guy in here. Feels pretty good, nice and smooth. There we go, one shortened grub screw. Let's go take a look and see if it fits in the collet we made. Pop you in here. Oh, perfect. Look at that. Nice and solid. That is exactly what I wanted. And okay, as stated, just enough to get a crescent wrench on. So we can then loosen it in the collet. There we go. Adjust that anywhere I want within the collet, and I'm golden. Perfect. Now the only thing that might come in, and one of the reasons I did this in aluminum, okay, disposable, easily modifiable, that surface there, you see how it's larger than this hole, okay? This hole has a depth to it. So if I need to come really close to the surface, I'll need to machine this down to fit within that hole with enough clearance where I could grab the part but not grab this. So again, that's the reason for aluminum. Easy to produce, cheap, you know, knock them out in minutes, no big deal. It's just a shaft, right? Super simple. So as time goes on though, could do many things. I could thread the end of this. A lot of those parts are M5s on one end. Thread it into here, have it threaded in the seat, close the collet on it, and that's going to be about the most solid thing you could ever imagine getting. So that's it. There's the piece. Okay, so here's the finished assembly, and as I stated about being able to turn down that piece, so here's the collet that I need to use to manufacture those small components, and it has a 0.81 depth before it bottoms out internally, so I cut this to 0.82. As you can see, we adjust here, right? So take our collet, insert our collet stop. If I can get my hands to work in front of the camera here. There we go. Snug it up. There we are. And now we'll take our insert. And there you can see now that is just a hair below the surface, but I can set that to any depth that I want and get a repeatable set when I want to put small components in here. So now with this piece, you see we have that small little burr on the end. I can set it in here and then set it to any depth I want by adjusting my stop. Whoops. And now what this will do is allow me to get repeatable accuracy. So if I set that to arbitrarily here and I want to face this off, every piece I put in my collet after that, I can face off without having to remeasure. It's going to save me an unbelievable amount of time. Overall, I think this was a great build. It's something I've been needing for a while, and being able to remake the internal stops any way that I want down the road really will pay off big time. Again, this was aluminum, cheap, easy, had it on hand. For anything long term, I probably would make it out of steel, just for the simple fact of, you know, divots and dents. Eventually, this is going to get scarred up enough where it'll have some difficulty sliding easily in here, but because it is aluminum, I can just sand it down. So, all right, hope you enjoyed that. Hope it helps. Try and get some stills of this for people so they can see how this came out. Thanks.